Neji's death is by far one of the most poorly constructed scenes in the entire Naruto franchise. It's about time we talked about this very large elephant in the room. Neji's death. I was honestly astonished with how much controversy the scene got. There wasn't ever a rant about it. So, of course I don't want to just break down why this scene is awful. I'm not satisfied with that. I want to break down who Neji is as a character, why other scenes had more dramatic weight to them, and why it made more sense for him to die in part 1 when fighting Kidomaru, well, not dead but incapacitated permanently, and finally why his death betrays the narrative and message of the series once more. Alright, here goes. Neji's character. Now, in order to understand why Neji's death scene is so bad, we need to understand who Neji is as a character and why other scenes with him had such dramatic tensions. Instead of going into Neji's backstory, I'm going to go into why some would say that Neji vs Naruto is one of the best fights in the entire series. Now I want you to re-watch the actual fight itself. The majority of it is Neji talking about his backstory. Then it should hit you that Neji vs Naruto, while being what some would call one of the best fights in the series, doesn't have much fighting in it. Now how can that be? There is a fundamental rule whenever it comes to fighting in fiction. Good fights usually, or truly, I'm not saying they all, can't put the torches down, can't be appreciated with proper context and stakes. What do we know about Neji from the fight and his previous battle with Hinata? He has an ideology and believes that he's a realist. He secretly detested the main house family for sacrificing his father for the actions of another, ferociously defeated Hinata, possibly almost killing her and ridiculing her after the fight, and firmly held the ideology that destiny could never be changed. What do we know about Naruto? He has a lot to prove. It took him much longer to master a jutsu that other students were able to use with ease as a prerequisite for Ninja Academy graduation. He was isolated by his peers and firmly believes with enough hard work and determination you can overcome a gifted natural. Neji was born with a powerful AQ, at least at the time before the power scale took off. Dojutsu that seemed impossible for him to beat. He truly felt like he was the underdog in that situation, and when he lost his chakra points the situation was truly dire, or at least seemed so. While you're seeing two individuals fighting, you also seeing the clashing of ideologies here. Each of them both have something to prove and a reason beyond advancing to the next round. The more that I think about it, it reminds me of Todoroki vs Midoriya. Not to mention his hype. With his Byakugan he was hyped to be able to take on Jonin. Now that we have analyzed his fight with Naruto, we can move on to his fight with Spider-Man Kidomaru. In this fight Neji is shown having to fight his own ideology and being forced to adopt the one that both Naruto and Lee had in order to get out of the situation he was in. He was put into a pretty bad situation and basically forced a stalemate. You see, the theme was in this fight Neji's growth and how he managed to win after Naruto inspired him to not give up when the situation seemed bleak. It makes the scene much sweeter. Now, why should Neji have lost his life or been incapacitated in the fight with Kidomaru? It certainly would have not only raised the stakes and made way for the much darker tone that Shippuden would bring, but would also be better because Neji was never really used in Shippuden. It's kinda like how Kishi likes to keep around characters that he has plans for but never actually do anything later on. Neji in most Shippuden. Neji in Shippuden was so underutilized here that it makes me wonder what the point of bringing him here was. What does Neji do pre-war arc in Shippuden of significance? No joke, I loaded up a wiki page just to check and be sure I'm not getting anything wrong here, and no, I'm not counting filler. In the Kazekage arc he does something of significance by fighting Kisame and assisting Team 7. That was a thing, but not much on the grand scheme. The entirety of Team Guy took off from the Pain Invasion arc. The revival scene deserves its own separate rant, and doesn't appear to do much in the 5-Cage Summit arc. You see the problem here? There is not build up toward his eventual demise. I'm not going to go into this here because it deserves its own section. Anywho, as for the pre-Death War arc, all we see is Neji defeating Zetsu clones. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. It's weird because the filler at least tries to have Neji actually do something. He fought a resurrected Kidomaru in the anime. I'm glad the wiki makes this distinction. Neji's death and the aftermath. And here is where it all culminated like a clogged drain. I attempted to call this a character assassination literally. After shafting him for most of Shippuden, the most relevant thing that Neji does is die. He sacrificed himself to bolster the character development of Naruto and Hinata and their relationship. Well, if you happen to be a Neji fan and despised the pairing of Hinata and Naruto, man, you must have been pissed. Neji, in his ironic efforts to actually fight his destiny, actually dies because it's his destiny proving him right earlier in the series. Neji was a natural genius and needed several Jonin to restrict him, while Naruto was an underdog. This was established early in series and in my rant. Well, guess what? Due to the combination of the power scale taking off and the lack of screen time to characters that aren't Team 7, Naruto's very ideology conflicts with his power, and basically he is a subject of nepotism power-wise. Let's lay this out. Uzumakis are related to the Senju clan. You know what this means? That means that Naruto is related to Hashirama, Tobirama, and Tsunade just from that bloodline alone. I'm not done yet though. The 4th Hokage is his father, and he had the 3rd Hokage and soon to be 6th Hokages were his teachers. That quite a rich bloodline. It almost seems as if he was destined to be Hokage with the connections that he basically had. Fancy that. Not to mention when he befriended Kurama, he was so drastically above everybody that the other Konoha ninja are pretty much fodder at that point. Now, I'm not going to say that Naruto didn't work for his power, he did, but it increased so dramatically above everyone else I kinda wish that he toned it down. Anyway, the point I'm getting at is that by Neji's own logic, someone like Lee, him or any nobody has no chance of becoming Hokage no matter how hard they work, because privileged genetics will always win. He was just wrong on the victor of the fight. I should also elaborate one thing I said earlier. While truly good fights, really any scene in general, can't be truly appreciated without context, the opposite can rule true as well. So I apologize if all of this seems redundant to many of you, but you need to understand how badly this scene fails as a single-handedly but raised the message of the series and how it all culminated into this. Back to the death scene. Neji was taken out like the fodder ninja from before. If you only watched Shippuden, they exist, trust me, and not the original series, then you really aren't driven to care about Neji all that much because he doesn't mean much. Now Chris, you say Kishi was trying to go for it anyone can die at any time feeling. That may be fine and dandy for you, but it leaves us with very little build-up and it comes out of the blue. Not to mention, but Neji is the only character that dies in that manner with little build-up. Even Obio had more build-up toward his demise than Neji. Not to mention, not many other characters really see Neji's death as that significant. We don't get a reaction from Team Gaia, which is very disappointing considering that they've been a team for their entire lives. Lee is the only one who seems to cry at Neji's death. We didn't get a reaction out of Tenten, and Guy told Lee the equivalent of man up. You'd think a character this impactful would have caused everyone associated with him to develop. Now I don't mind what Guy said because war is a battlefield. It's not the greatest place to mourn, but it would have been nice to see something. Anything for basically what equates to a family. The worst part is Lee has the least reason on the theme to be mourning for him because before the Chunin exam arc Neji didn't really respect Lee at all, so it's like salt on an open wound. It has just the way that Neji is taken out of the plot is so egregious that it makes the arc so much worse. Combine that with all of the character development that Neji went through, all wasted here, and you've got one of the worst scenes in the series for me. Thoughts, opinions?